All right, so buckle up, everybody, because this deep dive is taking us into some pretty uncharted territory. We're talking
Killing me.
chosen ones and battling unseen forces and karma, but like karma as a cosmic weapon. You guys sent us this source, and let's just say it's
It's a lot.
yeah, it's a fascinating blend of self-empowerment and well, some ideas that might raise an eyebrow or two.
Yeah, you're not kidding. The source that you provided, it seems to be kind of weaving a very specific worldview, one that blends elements of spirituality, self-improvement, with some claims that could definitely be described as out there.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. This source keeps mentioning chosen ones, these individuals that are, destined for greatness, but constantly under attack. It paints this vivid picture of an epic struggle, almost like a cosmic battle playing out in everyday life. So what is the source actually saying about who these chosen ones are and why they're supposedly targeted?
So the source, it never explicitly defines who qualifies as a chosen one. But reading between the lines, it seems to be implying that anyone who feels different or misunderstood or like they have a special purpose in life might fit the bill.
Okay.
And as for why they're targeted, well, the source suggests it's all about jealousy. These supposed attackers are envious of the chosen one's light and energy, seeing them as a threat.
It's interesting. It almost plays into this very human desire to feel special and unique, while also tapping into those insecurities we all have about fitting in and measuring up. But wouldn't that mean we're all constantly under attack from someone or something?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that this source raises, and it leads us to the concept of spiritual warfare. This idea that there's an ongoing battle between good and evil happening on a spiritual plane, and we're all kind of caught in the crossfire.
Okay, wait, hold up a second. Spiritual warfare. I feel like we need to define some terms here. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely one of those concepts that can mean different things to different people. But generally speaking, spiritual warfare refers to the idea that there are unseen forces, both good and bad, constantly influencing our lives.
Okay.
And this belief shows up in various religions and spiritual traditions throughout history. And in this source, it's used to explain why these chosen ones are constantly facing challenges and opposition.
So it's not just everyday struggles we're talking about. It's like a supernatural battle playing out in our lives, and these chosen ones are on the front lines. But how do they fight back? I know the source mentions karma, right?
Exactly. Karma is a very central theme here, but it's presented in a very specific way.
Yeah.
It's not so much about the classic understanding of karma as actions having consequences. Instead, it's portrayed almost like a weaponized force that automatically punishes anyone who dares to attack a chosen one.
So you're saying if I even think a bad thought about a chosen one, I might get struck by lightning. That's some intense cosmic payback.
Well, source doesn't go quite that far, but it does suggest that any negative action directed towards a chosen one, it will inevitably backfire on the attacker, bringing them misfortune and suffering. And the more someone tries to harm a chosen one, the worse the karmic backlash will be.
Okay, now that's where I start to get a little uneasy. On the one hand, the idea that goodness will always prevail is appealing. But on the other hand, it almost seems like a way to shut down critical thinking or questioning authority. Like, if you disagree with someone, are you automatically attacking them and inviting bad karma into your life?
That's a really perceptive point.
Yeah.
And it highlights one of the potential pitfalls of this kind of belief system.
Uh-huh.
If you're constantly worried about karmic retribution, it could discourage you from speaking up, challenging ideas,
Yeah.
or even just expressing healthy skepticism.
Yeah, and the source gets even more specific when it talks about the ways these chosen ones are supposedly being targeted.
Right.
It mentions something called gang stalking. So what is that exactly?
So gang stalking, as a belief, is characterized by the feeling of being constantly watched, followed, and harassed by a group of people. It's a phenomenon that's been documented in clinical settings, often associated with paranoia and delusional thinking. However, it's important to distinguish between the very real distress that people experiencing these feelings go through and the claims made by this particular source.
So in the real world, there are people who genuinely believe they're being gang stalked, and it can be a very frightening experience. But this source is connecting it to this chosen one narrative, suggesting there's some supernatural force behind it.
Precisely. And that's where we need to tread carefully. This is a source that blends elements of real-world psychological phenomena with its own very specific interpretation, potentially appealing to people who might already be feeling vulnerable or targeted.
Right. Yeah, that's a little unsettling. It is.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, it feels like we're venturing into some pretty sensitive territory here. On the one hand, we don't want to dismiss anyone's genuine fears or experiences. But on the other hand, we have to acknowledge that this source is presenting a very specific and potentially misleading interpretation of those experiences.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking becomes so crucial. We need to be able to separate the emotional appeal of an idea from its factual basis.
Right.
Just because something resonates with us emotionally doesn't necessarily mean it's true or healthy.
So how do we apply that critical thinking to this specific source? Like, what are some of the red flags that might signal we need to step back and examine the information more carefully?
Well, one of the most obvious red flags is the lack of evidence. The source makes some pretty bold claims about chosen ones and karma and spiritual warfare, but it doesn't offer any concrete proof to back up those assertions. It relies heavily on emotional appeals, vivid imagery, vague pronouncements. But when you start asking where's the evidence, it all starts to feel a little flimsy.
Right. It's all very captivating, but it's like a house of cards. If you pull out one card, the whole thing could collapse. And the source's call to action is another red flag. It encourages readers to purchase an ebook and join a Discord community, all centered around this chosen one narrative.
Yeah, and that's where things get even more concerning. While online communities can offer support and connection, they can also become echo chambers, reinforcing potentially harmful beliefs and isolating people from alternative perspectives.
Right.
And when you add a financial component, selling products or services, tied to these beliefs, it raises questions about the source's motives. Are they genuinely trying to help people, or are they exploiting those vulnerabilities for profit?
It's almost like they're preying on people's insecurities, offering a sense of belonging and purpose while simultaneously instilling fear and distrust of the outside world. And when you combine that with the claim that any attempt to question or challenge these beliefs is seen as an attack that will be met with karmic retribution, it creates a very powerful and potentially dangerous dynamic.
Exactly. It becomes a closed loop where dissenting voices are silenced, critical thinking is discouraged, and the source's authority is reinforced. And for someone who might already be feeling isolated or marginalized, that can be incredibly seductive.
Yeah, it's like finding a place where you finally feel understood and accepted, but at what cost? You might be sacrificing your own autonomy, your ability to think critically and make informed decisions.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to have a healthy balance between seeking support and maintaining independence, between finding belonging and preserving your own individuality.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that true strength comes from within, from your ability to think for yourself, question authority, and make choices that align with your own values.
So how do we reconcile this idea of feeling special and chosen with the need to stay grounded in reality and avoid falling prey to potentially harmful beliefs? Like, is it even possible to have both?
Well, it's not about rejecting the idea of feeling special altogether.
Yeah.
We all have unique talents and qualities that make us valuable. The key is to find a healthy balance
Yeah.
between recognizing your own worth and acknowledging that you're not immune to the challenges of life. It's about recognizing that you can be both special and flawed, chosen and still figuring things out.
Right, it's about owning your whole self, the good and the bad, the light and the shadow. And it's about understanding that growth and transformation often come from embracing those imperfections, not trying to erase them.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that true empowerment, it comes not from believing you're superior to others or immune to harm,
Right.
but from developing your own inner strength, resilience, and critical thinking skills.
So what's the takeaway for our listener? How do we navigate this complex world of beliefs and information without getting lost in the echo chambers or falling prey to potentially harmful ideas?
First and foremost, it's about being aware of the potential for manipulation. Always question the source's motives. Look for evidence to support their claims. If something feels too good to be true, or if it's making you feel anxious or paranoid, it's a good idea to step back and seek out alternative perspectives.
Right. Don't just take someone's word for it, especially if they're trying to sell you something or get you to join their community. Do your own research.
Yes.
Consult with trusted sources, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that you're not alone. If you're struggling with feelings of paranoia or persecution, there are mental health professionals and support groups that can help you understand what you're experiencing and develop coping mechanisms.
Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And there's no shame in reaching out for support when you need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, true strength, it comes not from isolating yourself or clinging to extreme beliefs, but from building healthy connections, engaging in critical thinking, and creating a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Welcome back to the deep dive, you guys. So we're picking up our conversation about chosen ones, karma, and that blurred line between self-empowerment and potentially harmful beliefs.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already, but I think it's helpful to kind of zoom in on some specific examples from the source material.
Yeah.
Sometimes those little details can reveal a lot about the bigger picture,
Totally. It's like those little hidden clues in a detective novel that crack the case wide open. So what jumped out at you from the source?
One phrase that really struck me was the way the source talks about the chosen one's enemies digging their own graves.
Oh, yeah?
It's a vivid, almost violent image.
Right.
And it speaks volumes about the worldview being presented.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It implies that any attempt to harm a chosen one will inevitably backfire, with the attacker ultimately suffering the consequences of their own actions.
Exactly. And it ties back to that central theme of karma. It's this automatic force of retribution. Remember how the source repeatedly emphasized that the chosen one doesn't need to seek revenge because the universe will take care of it? This phrase really drives that point home.
Yeah, it does paint a picture of a universe where there's this built-in system of justice, ensuring that goodness will always prevail. And I can see how that would be incredibly appealing to someone who's feeling vulnerable or like they're constantly battling these unseen forces.
Absolutely. It offers a sense of security and comfort, knowing that there's this cosmic safety net protecting you from harm.
Yeah.
But it also raises some questions about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And the potential for this belief to be used to justify maybe harmful actions.
That's a great point. If you believe that anyone who disagrees with you or challenges your beliefs is automatically an enemy who's going to suffer karmic retribution, that could create a very dangerous dynamic.
Right. It could lead to a sense of moral superiority.
Yeah.
And a justification for silencing dissenting voices.
Totally.
And that's one of the reasons why it's so crucial to approach these kinds of beliefs with a critical eye.
Yeah.
To examine the potential downsides as well as the allure.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the source's call to action.
Yeah.
It encourages readers to purchase an ebook and join a Discord community. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's nothing inherently wrong with selling products or building online communities. But in this context, it's important to consider the potential risks. Remember, we've talked about how these kinds of communities can become echo chambers, reinforcing potentially harmful beliefs and isolating people from alternative perspectives.
Right. And when you add a financial component, it raises questions about the source's motives.
Right.
Are they genuinely trying to help people, or are they exploiting those vulnerabilities for profit?
It's a valid question. And it's one that, the listener should consider carefully before investing their time, energy, or money into this community. Remember, true empowerment comes from within, from developing your own critical thinking skills and making informed decisions, not from blindly following someone else's teachings.
So what's the takeaway for our listener? What should they keep in mind when encountering information like this?
It's all about being an informed consumer of information.
Okay.
Don't just accept everything you read or hear at face value. Question the source's motives, look for evidence to support their claims, and seek out alternative perspectives.
And remember, it's okay to feel drawn to ideas that make you feel special or empowered.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to approach those ideas with a healthy dose of skepticism and to make sure they're, not causing you harm.
Exactly. And if you find yourself feeling isolated or struggling with difficult emotions, don't hesitate to reach out for help.
Yeah.
There are resources available to support you.
Yeah.
And seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It is. I think this deep dive has been a real eye-opener, exploring how these seemingly empowering beliefs can sometimes have a darker side.
It's been a fascinating journey for sure.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's, encouraged our listener to think critically about the information they encounter and to prioritize their own well-being.
Absolutely. So as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.
And remember, you have the power to create your own narrative, to define your own reality,
yes,
and to build a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, stay curious.